help the organizations that are here listening to understand ION's position in the marketplace. You've acquired a number of different treasury management systems, and to someone who's not familiar with how they address the different market, what is ION's position with this product suite?
So over the last number of years, as you mentioned, we've acquired a number of different treasury management products. We've got a portfolio of 7 different brands. Each brand brings something unique to the market. So we believe that we're chasing a market that is upwards of hundreds of thousands of companies, and we don't believe that there's one product that's suitable for that large of a market. Now, obviously, our intent is not to confuse the market, that you need 7 products, but we believe that there's a right fit for the needs that you have.
So I think of it as the market of treasury management systems, treasury risk management systems addresses a large scale of needs, just like transportation might be from sneakers to a bike to a car to a jet. Am I going across the street or across the country? Big difference.
Absolutely, and I think that's kind of getting down to the real key, which is that there's some really key differentiators. I think that the treasury management system market, we've been around for a long time. We've seen a number of competitors move into the market. We've seen a number of competitors be acquired by consolidators like ourselves. But ultimately, over the course of time, the treasury management systems, ours as well as our competitors, they're very good at managing really that core treasury. And so it's getting harder and harder to differentiate on pure functionality. So I think that it is important that companies that are thinking about implementing a treasury management system, when they do their search, to really think about what is important to them, to make it personal to them. It's not about identifying every single last requirement when you go into an RFP process, so you wind up with an RFP with 1,000 different business requirements, but it's really, what is that key focus for you? What is the priority for you? What are you trying to achieve, and what are your objectives?
Yeah, that's a good lead into the next question. I wanted to ask you about the challenges that you see. Corporations are coming to you asking about things. There's a challenge that they have in the selection process, and in particular on the RFP process. This can be a massive number of questions, some that don't apply. How are you seeing these challenges, and what are your suggestions for this?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, all of our time, I think, is our most precious commodity, right? We are all, there's never enough hours in the day, and I think we are really need to focus in on managing our time wisely. So if we think about the RFP process and we think about it from a cost perspective, as time is a cost. If we spend a lot of time putting together and collecting the requirements that I mentioned into such a deep level of detail, that's a lot of time spent on the company who's going to issue that RFP. Then once that RFP is received by a vendor like ION, we're going to review that RFP, and we're going to fill in the 500, 600, 700,000 questions that you answer. And that's going to take us some time to do that. And then we respond back to you, and then it's going to take you some time to then analyze all of those responses. And before you know it, 6 months has passed. And as I mentioned, time is precious. So how can we get to that same point of level of learning after a 6-month period in maybe a matter of a few weeks? And I think that that's really getting down to understanding what is the priority. So from a technology, and so how, what are some of those key priorities? I think is really what you're getting at is, so it's not just about the Treasury Department, but there's also IT considerations as well. So perhaps there's some there's a strategy, there's a direction that IT has provided that they want only a SaaS solution. They don't want anything that's non-SaaS.
Platform, yeah.
A platform, exactly. So this is, possibly a system that's hosted in a private cloud, or it could be a multi-tenant solution where you're constantly on the latest versions, upgrades are pushed out to you, and we've certainly seen a trend towards that space, but it's not for everybody. We also have a number of customers that we serve, and one group that stands out here is central banks. So central banks is an area where they're not looking for private cloud. There's no way that the bank will allow for that, and so they need an installed solution. So from an IT perspective, that can knock out of our 7 products, that can knock you down to 4 of them. So that's one differentiator. Another differentiator is budget. I mean, how much do you want to spend? I think the car analogy is a great one. If you just need to go a mile, perhaps actually you don't need to buy a car. You can use a bike. It's the same, a car. Car analogies, even within the cars. Do you need a Ferrari, or will a Chevrolet do the job? So I think we have to incorporate that buying habit and how we differentiate what we want to buy that we do in our personal lives really into when we're thinking about a treasury system, that there's core functionality that's going to be available, and just trust that it's available. But what is really most important to you? And then let's just focus in on that and talk to a few vendors that are out there and see what they can do. And I bet before you even issue an RFP, you'll be able to get a good sense of what that market looks like.
Excellent. So the selection, people coming up with hundreds of questions and taking months and months and months. Everyone's in a hurry, and they want to shortcut the process. And what you're saying is you're seeing a really long process because they're asking so many questions, it's hard to differentiate. So what is the way forward? What should be changed or improved? You've described some of it already, saying get an education on the market. What are the key areas? Because you're really talking about what are the key points of differentiation, not the core function that everyone has.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the advice is to just work with people like Strategic Treasurer. Work directly with the vendors that are out there, and start having a dialogue on really understanding what they can offer. And I think in order to have that dialogue, we need the companies should consider their priorities. So if you have a system, for example, that needs to be sunset in the matter of 6 months, that might be a key priority for you. If you have 8 different systems across Treasury and you'd like to consolidate into one, that might be a priority for you. Perhaps actually I spoke to a CFO recently of a company that is, it's a small company, US-based. They have something like around 50 or so bank accounts, private equity owned. And I asked the CFO, I said, so how do you get an idea of how much cash you have? And his answer was, I go to every single bank portal that we use, and I physically look and see what my statement balance is, and I track it all in Excel. I said, how often do you do that? He said, I do it once a month. And then he also went on to tell me that, I said, well, what concerns you about that? He says, well, my private equity partner requires that I provide 5 days notice if I need any capital. Well, if I only have my cash balance for once a month, then I don't really have a good idea of how well I'm tracking. And at any one point in time, I might need cash immediately, which then for the CFO would be pretty embarrassing to have to call up his private equity partner and say, I really messed up, I don't have enough cash, and I need cash in 2 days. So it's not the situation you want to be in. And I think that just driving to for that company, that priority is cash visibility. And perhaps actually there's a quick solution we can actually put in place to help that need, but then open it up to a broader perspective of now I need not just cash visibility, but I really want to manage my capital markets activity. I really want to see long-term liquidity and work on that planning.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. I think the other question I have is, you've done a lot of research, received hundreds and thousands of requests for proposals and responded to them. Just to provide some numbers behind that, how many of those questions provide a very significant difference between your product suite or set?
Yeah, so we looked at the numbers recently, and over the past 5 years, we've received close to 1,000 RFPs. And when you look within those RFPs and the requirements that are being asked, they're about 95% similar. And so our responses, you would expect, are 95% similar. But I think that when you get that back, and one of the things we'd also done, and we'll be doing a session later on about this today, where we look across, we took one example RFP where we actually responded with 3 different products. And in that RFP, when you look at the level of coverage that we provide across the 3 products, you see a pretty much full functionality, full coverage across all products. So if I'm a customer, and I used to be a customer, I was I was working at General Motors for 5 years, and we did this RFP process. If I was to receive that chart that showed the level of coverage across the products, I actually would probably be more confused and a bit disappointed that I spent all this time to get to the point where I really haven't learned any more than I could have learned very instantaneously on my own. And ultimately, once you start to see the systems and you go through the workshops, that's when you really start to see those differentiators, which I think you can get ahead of the game early on.
Excellent. Those are good points. So points of differentiation, types of technology, platform. There's a number of areas that create points of distinction, and if we're asking thousands of questions, it doesn't always get you to the point. When you're selecting technology, and the selection of Treasury technology is vastly more important today, I believe, than it was 5 years ago because of all these changes. This requires doing a little more work up front to narrowing your selection to the right items. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.